Hey guys, and welcome to another C# tutorial. It's been a long time. For that I do apologize. I do try to keep them frequent, but you know how it is, life gets in the way, and just a busy little bee, so I do apologize. And anyway, without further ado, let's get on with this one. Today we're going to be talking about the table layout panel. Table layout panel helps you to optimize the control layout of your Windows Forms applications, and you can set up. You basically lay the page out with this table layout panel, and as if it was a grid, and then you size your columns and you size your rows in such a fashion as to lay out a template, and then you can just drag and drop your controls onto the table layout panel and scale them accordingly. I shall demo that now and give you an example on how you would go about building a form. So first thing you do is you drag your table layout panel onto your form. You can drag this and you can place this in a localized location within the form if you so wish. I don't, or not for this demonstration I won't. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dock it to the form. So I go to dock over here in the properties panel, and I click on the fill dock, and now you can see that the panel has taken up the entire form. Okay, now I'm going to create a couple of text boxes, labels, a list box, and some picture controls, just to give you an idea of a layout. And for that I'm going to use a couple of rows and a couple of columns. So we'll insert rows and columns, and you can do this in a couple of different ways. You can either go down to the bottom of the properties panel here, and you can add a column, as you can see here, add column, or you can add row here, or you can edit rows and columns, or you can go up to the top right hand side of your form. Make sure you have your table layout panel selected, and on the top right you'll see you've got this tiny little anchor. Click on it and you'll get a menu pop up, and you've got edit rows and columns. Click on that, and again you can add rows and add columns this way. Okay, so select rows from the show drop down here if you want to add a row, and select columns if you want to add a column. Okay, so let's do that. So for the demonstration today we're going to have 4 columns. So currently we have 4 columns, so that's fine, and then we're going to have 4 rows. Okay, so let's look at our rows. We've got 3, so let's add another one. Click OK. If we look at our layout, it doesn't look like anything particularly spectacular, so what we need to do now is we can drag these around accordingly into the format for our page layout. Get a rough idea. So for example, we want a couple of text boxes, and we want a couple of labels, the list box, and some picture boxes. Okay, so we're going to have a label control in this panel here, and we're going to have a text control here. We're going to have a spacer here, so I need one more row actually, so we're going to add another row. There we go. We'll drag that up. Okay, so you get the idea. We've got a row here where we can put a label. So if we go to our common controls, and we'll enter the label here, just drag it over and plonk it there for now. And then a text box, just to give us a rough idea of what this is going to look like. Put the text box into the column next to it. Okay, and then do the same again for the table below. Before I do that, actually, for the row below, I do apologize. Before I do that, what I'm going to do is format these controls, and then we can just copy them, paste them, and it just saves us time to reformat them, okay, in the future. So click your label control, and we want this thing to be positioned a bit nicer than this, a little bit more sweeter. It's, being stuck in the top left there doesn't actually do us any favors. So we can actually go up to the anchor property here within the properties panel, and you'll see that it's anchored to the top left. So if you drop the drop down box, you'll see here you've got 4 anchors, a left, a top, a bottom, and a right, and currently you've got the top and the left selected. So deselect the top, reselect the right. Okay, and then click onto your panel, and you'll see that the label now actually moves into the center of the cell, and it's stretched across the cell. Okay, so it occupies that entire cell. One thing to note is you can't put multiple controls into one cell. So we put label 2 into that cell, and we try and drag label 3 into the same cell. It's not going to go. Okay, so it's one cell, one component. Okay, so let's delete label 2 for the moment, and then we'll select label 1. We'll control copy that, and we'll paste that onto our form and then drag that onto the second row into the cell where we want it to go. And you'll see that it's retained the anchoring properties from the previous one, so a lot quicker. Same again now for the text box. Let's go to the anchor. Okay, so we go to our properties panel, we look at the anchor, top left, deselect top, reselect right, click into your form, and you'll see now that the text box is stretched across the column, quite big, so a little bit wider than what we expected it to be. So what we can do here now, you see, is we can add an additional column, and then we can drag the drag bar for that column across, if I can get hold of it, and you'll see now that it's resizing that text entry field. Okay, and then drag the lower label up so we get a rough dimension, click on the text box, control copy it, control paste it with control V. Okay, drop that into the cell where you want it to go, and you can see again it's kept the format of the properties and it's stretched across the column. Okay, a bit more resizing here to get the scales right. Okay, that's roughly about right. So the next thing we want to do is have a guesstimate at the width of these rows, or the height of these rows. So the best way to do that is to look at your control dimension. So if we look at the text box, for example, drag down to the text box properties and look at the size field here, we'll notice that the text box is height 20, so we need to have the row at least 20, if not higher. I tend to go for 30, so if we select again our little anchor at the top right hand side of the table layout panel, okay, go to our edit rows and columns properties. Okay, make sure that you've got the row that you want to change the width of selected. Okay, so go to rows, row 2 is the first label row. Okay, select absolute and then type in the pixel height. Okay, so we're going to go for 30 pixels, and you'll see now that we've adopted the width of 30 pixels, and we're going to do that now for the second row, text control. Okay, so that's actually going to be on row 4. Okay, select absolute and again type in 30, select OK, and you'll see that those two rows now have adopted the correct heights. Okay, 30 pixel each. The row in the middle is a spacer row, and so we'll go back to our edit rows, we'll go to the middle row, which is now going to be row 3, and we can set that to say 15 pixels, and let's set the top row to percentage, and let's set that to say 10%. Click enter. Now what that actually does, it means when you actually start dragging your control form around, your table form around, if I can get hold of the drag bars, get them to show, here we go, as that goes up you'll notice that the top row is shrinking, okay, because we've got it in as a percentage. But if you notice the label 1, label 2 row and the spacer row, because we've got those set as an absolute value of 30 pixels, 15 pixels and 30 pixels respectively, they don't actually shrink. So that's quite handy to know, that is, so that you can scale images and things that are stored within inside this control. They will scale proportionately, whereas you don't want to lose, for example, the label or the text boxes, or text fields. So that's quite handy to know. You notice now when we shrink it, we are losing the labels and we are losing our text boxes. That's because we set the row height to an absolute value and not the column. Okay, so the next thing we need to do now is to look at our label property down here for the size, look at the label width. Okay, so we say that label is perfectly fine, we want our labels to stay at that width. Okay, so we make sure we got the label selected. Okay, we go down here to our size box and we look, and it's 105 wide. Okay, if that's not clear, drop it down using the little plus key here, and you'll see the width is 105 pixels. Okay, so make sure again you've got your table layout panel selected, click on your anchor top right, edit and remove columns, make sure you've got columns selected in your show panel here, drop down, and we want to change the width of our first column. We're not too worried about the width of that, so we can leave that as a percentage. So for now let's leave that at say 10%. Okay, and we didn't want to close that down, so let's get it back up again. Now let's go to column 2, which is our label width. Okay, and we've already said that was, I think it was 105. So if we go to say an absolute value and type that in now, say 110, we don't want it to be exactly the same width as the label, otherwise you'll start chopping off things like the label borders. Okay, so we click OK and let's see what that looks like. That's fine. Now obviously both the labels are in column 2, so you only have to adjust that the once, obviously. Okay, now column 3, do exactly the same thing. column 3. It's currently set absolute to 230, so that's fine. Column 3 is already set for us to an absolute value of 230 pixels. Column 4 we can leave alone. So now when we scale it, you'll notice those columns aren't scaling. Yeah, they're moving along with the form exactly as we want it. Okay, and you notice as well that the fourth column here isn't scaling, which is great, because now what we're going to do is we're going to start putting in our other controls. Okay, so one thing is nice to note here also is you can embed these table layout panels, and that's ideal. So for example, what we don't want to do here, we're going to put 4 picture controls inside this quadrant at the bottom right, this big cell. Now we want those to lay out quite nicely. Now we could use a flow control, but we're not talking about flow layout panel controls. This thing here now in the containers panel, we're talking about table layout panels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the table layout panel over and drop it into that cell, and as you can see, you've now got a new table layout panel currently docked to the top left hand side of that cell. So if with that table layout selected, go to your dock here, okay, and then drop it down and click center. Okay, and now you'll see that it's actually populated that entire cell, and it's docked to that entire cell, which is great. Now when we drag, you'll see that it's adopting the width of that column. Okay, so we don't have to worry about the dimensions of that, unless obviously you want to shrink the columns and you want to shrink the rows to put in additional controls. But we're going to have symmetrically dimensioned picture controls in here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to drag a picture box in the top left, we're going to drop a picture box in the top right, and we're going to drop a picture box in the bottom right. Okay, the bottom left we're going to actually have a video control. I want to put a video in there just to demonstrate the flexibility of this tool. Okay, so next we're going to do is we want to dock these picture controls to these 3 cells. Okay, so select the picture control, go to dock, drop down the drop down list and dock it. Okay, and you'll see now that it's adopted the entire area of that cell. Do that now for each of the 3 picture controls, 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add this video control, and the video control isn't normally, you can see it here, like the Windows Media Player, it's not normally inside of the toolbox. You can see it is here for me because I've already added it. To add it, just right click on General, click on Choose Item, click on COM Components, okay, and then scroll down for Windows Media Player. RSTUVW, there we go, Windows Media Player. Make sure she's selected and click OK, and then you'll get this little icon down here. So then drag the Windows Media Player over to the cell, drop it. Okay, now that's on there. Go to dock and fully dock that. Okay, there you go. So now you've got a Windows Media Player in the the third cell. Okay, so now you might be wondering where's the list box. So the idea of this little demo is we're going to get a list box and add the list box to our cell, and the list box then is going to list down the elements that we want to show inside our picture controls and our video controls. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to dock this list box as always. So drop down in the properties panel, dock. Okay, now she looks a little bit thin, and she certainly is, and she's not going to be able to show you fully the length of the strings or the properties that we put inside the list box. So what we need to do really is we would like that list box to extend across 2 columns. Okay, so that's not too difficult. Click the list box, make sure the list box is highlighted, go over to your properties panel for the list box, and look for column span. There you go, and you'll notice that column span is currently set to 1, so set column span to 2, press enter, and now you'll see that the list box actually extends over those 2 columns nicely. Okay, so that's done, and now what we need to do is we just obviously need to add our images and our video to our list box. So we're going to do that nice and simply by simply selecting the list box, going down to the collection of items for the list box here where you've got items in the properties panel. Okay, expand your the collection editor and then just start typing in your items. Okay, so we're just going to have 3 images. And then we're going to have a video. Okay, keep it nice and simple.